first reading of Bill 54.
We respect all of the treaty rights that are enshrined in the Constitution.
We need the Premier to say no to separatism.
If you don't believe in Canada, then this government is spending too much time on you already.
The media is trying to describe this legislation as
We have been abused for many years.
If we all thought the federal election that just happened in Canada was this big news for the political landscape of Canada, I would urge you to think again, because we have much bigger issues on our hands, and these issues are becoming stronger and more prominent as a result of the election. What's happening in Alberta right now is real, and it's ignited a political firestorm across the whole country.
The outcome of this federal election, many Albertans and Western Canadians are expressing frustration and anger, feeling used and left out of the decision-making process.
If you guys are new here, welcome. I'm bringing you political stories that matter, told in plain English. If you appreciate these deep dives, please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. All right, so let's get right into it. Alberta is stirring up a fresh wave of political tension, and at the heart of it all, a controversial new bill, Bill 54, that would make it easier for regular citizens to call for referendums, including one on whether Alberta should separate from Canada.
Letter arrives after the Alberta government introduced legislation that would make it easier for citizens to start referendums, including one on separation.
I now move first reading of Bill 54.
And this time, it's not just political posturing. Indigenous leaders, federal officials, and even everyday Canadians are weighing in, because what Alberta's doing could have serious consequences for the whole country. Let's break it down. Premier Danielle Smith's government recently introduced Bill 54, officially called the Citizen Initiative Act. It lets Albertans launch petitions to trigger referendums on just about anything, including potentially leaving Canada.
Are expanding opportunities for Albertans to be involved in direct democracy by making changes to the threshold needed for successful citizens' initiatives. The signature collection time for citizens' initiatives will be extended from 90 days to 120 days. We are also improving the process by setting the threshold to be 10% of the number of eligible voters who participated in the last general election.
While the bill doesn't explicitly push for independence, critics say it's opening the door for more serious separatist efforts, and those efforts are already underway. I now move first reading of Bill 54, Smith said, framing it as a simple tool for democratic engagement. But others say the timing, the messaging, and the context of it all tell a very different story.
Smith pushed back against the letter Thursday, saying Bill 54 does not necessarily amount to her encouraging an independence vote.
I can see that the media is trying to describe this legislation as something it's not. It's a citizen initiative change that any petition can come forward.
We need to wake up, because this isn't just about Alberta politics. If Alberta ever did separate, it would fundamentally rewrite Canada as we know it, politically, economically, and even geographically. That's why this issue has Ottawa, First Nations leaders, and everyday Canadians watching nervously. In a bold move, two First Nations leaders, Chiefs Billy Joe Tuccaro and Sheldon Sunshine, sent an open letter to Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney. In it, they accused the Alberta government of violating treaty rights and stirring up a fake national unity crisis for political gain.
Premier Danielle Smith also received a letter. Chiefs Billy Joe Tuccaro and Sheldon Sunshine accuse her of violating treaty rights by trying to manufacture a national unity crisis.
Their message was blunt. If you don't like living in Canada, you are welcome to leave our traditional lands.
The Chiefs' letter said the Premier and anyone else unhappy living in Canada is welcome to leave their traditional lands.
Now, that's not just a metaphor. The letter is referring to treaty land that Alberta's premier governs, but which legally still belongs to Indigenous peoples under Canadian law. The Chiefs are furious, arguing that this referendum-friendly bill goes against the spirit of those treaties and threatens to destabilize Canada. Mark Carney, the newly elected Prime Minister, echoed those concerns. He reportedly demanded Alberta get in line, emphasizing the unity is not optional.
Get the province of Alberta in line. That's the demand of Prime Minister Mark Carney. It comes in a new letter signed by a pair of First Nation chiefs.
And he's not alone. The federal government has made it clear. Ottawa will fight any move towards separation, legally and politically. But Danielle Smith says the bill isn't what people are making it out to be. We respect all of the treaty rights and that are enshrined in Constitution under Section 35.
We respect all of the treaty rights that are enshrined in the Constitution under Section 35. And the Citizen Initiative Act is not new legislation, and it was never designed to, nor does it breach treaty agreements.
This is new legislation. It was never designed, nor does it breach treaty agreements.
And the Citizen Initiative Act is not new legislation, and it was never designed to, nor does it breach treaty agreements.
She also told reporters that while she's heard from separatists, she's personally not advocating for separation. Instead, she says she's fighting back against Ottawa's overreach on things like the net zero power regulations, and that Alberta's best bet is to work from within Canada, not outside of it. Still, separatist support in Alberta is rising. A recent poll shows that about 30% of Albertans are open to the idea of leaving Canada.
A recent poll found that 30% of Albertans are also interested in leaving Canada.
That's not just a fringe view anymore.
Premier met with the media to announce an appeal of Ottawa's net zero power regulations. She says she's heard from separatists, but is vowing to fight liberal policies from within Canada.
In fact, as soon as Smith finished speaking about the net zero regulations, small crowds formed outside the legislature calling for independence.
Shortly after Smith finished speaking inside the legislature, small groups gathered outside to call for Alberta independence.
One protester said, "We've been abused for many years. Equalization payments and stuff like that."
Because we have been abused for many years, like the equalization and stuff like that, so yeah.
The NDP, meanwhile, is accusing Smith of fanning the flames. They're calling on her to take a firm stand against separatism, something she hasn't explicitly done.
The NDP is also accusing Smith of stoking the separatism movement with her national unity threat and policies distancing Alberta from Ottawa.
"We need the Premier to say no to separatism," said NDP spokesperson. "We need her to stand with the Chiefs."
We need the Premier to say no to separatism. We need her to stay firm and say that she stands with the Chiefs, that Alberta will never be separated from the rest of Canada.
If you don't believe in Canada and you are a tiny, tiny fringe minority, then this government is spending too much time on you already.
And here's the part that might hit close to home. If Alberta goes down this road, it's not just Alberta that gets affected. It could trigger a domino effect. Quebec nationalists shaking up investor confidence and even messing with federal programs that every Canadian relies on. Some in Smith's cabinet are arguing calm. Her Indigenous Relations Minister said, "Emotions are high right now after the election. Let things cool down. People will settle and see it's not going to be as bad as some think." But critics say that it's a deflection. The bill exists. The conversations are happening. The separatist movement isn't new, but this time it's coming with new tools, new momentum, and a premier who hasn't ruled it out. And then there's the big question nobody wants to say out loud. What happens if a referendum does pass? Canada doesn't have a clear legal path for a province to leave. The Clarity Act, introduced after the 1995 Quebec referendum, lays out some ground rules, like the need for a clear question and a clear majority, but there's still no roadmap. It would almost certainly go to the Supreme Court, spark national protests, and divide Canadians for years to come. If this video helped you understand what's really happening in Alberta, please hit that like button. It tells YouTube this is worth sharing. And if you want more Canadian political deep dives that skip the spin and they're straight to the point, subscribe and stick with me. We've got a lot more to cover in the weeks ahead. And just To recap, Alberta has introduced legislation that makes it easier for citizens to call for referendums, including one on separation. Indigenous leaders say it violates treaties. Ottawa is demanding Alberta step in line. Smith insists the bill is being misrepresented, with 30% of Albertans say they'd consider leaving Canada. Meanwhile, the NDP and others say this is a crisis awaiting to happen. And honestly, they might be right. Canada's strength truly lies in its unity, but that unity is being tested in ways we haven't seen in decades. Let me know in the comments, do you think Alberta is serious about leaving Canada, or is this just political theater? I read every comment and I'd love to know what you think. Thanks so much for watching.